So what is science? What is technology, you might ask, as I'm talking about these issues? Science usually refers to a systematic body of knowledge about the observable world, facts or observations, about the world. Technology usually refers to material goods, methods, or knowledge used to carry out human ends. The key thing with technology is that it helps us do something. This technology makes it more convenient for me to move with my slides. This technology allows me to do a lot of word processing, preparing presentations, and a lot of other things. Technologies usually have a goal. They help you do something. This technology of a chair makes it more comfortable for me to sit and talk and give my presentation. Whereas science does not necessarily have to have an immediate goal. It's just knowledge about the world. Why do we have earthquakes? Why does it rain? Why does the sun shine? Why do we have tsunamis? Just about nature. It's facts or observations about the natural world. Whereas technology is usually associated with functionality. It serves a specific function. Maybe it's a bad function, but it serves a specific function. Technologies help us achieve some goal or some completion of a task. We can also characterize science and technology as follows. Knowing why something happens, why something works, why does an apple fall from the tree, Newton's question, is about knowing why. And knowing how something works, behaves, acts the way it does is considered to be technology. What counts as a technology? I'll come back to this later on in my slides. Any given technology does not have a single function. Its function can vary in time, in place, in context. So for example, previously, 50 years ago, computers were used mainly in the army for data analysis. Now they can be used for playing games, watching movies, and so forth. Place. In the US, a car is simply a mode of transportation to get from point A to point B. In China, it's a way to show off your wealth. So technologies have different functions. Depending on context, in a society in which war is taking place, a gun can be very lethal. In a peaceful society, it's maybe for leisure, for hunting, for collection, for different things. So what counts as a technology, and I'll come back to this, varies depending on time, place, and context. Technology doesn't have a single meaning. We can't think of a technology only as this technology as only a chair. It can have a different meaning, different function as well. This is just my previous point, that technologies and technical knowledge do not come from science alone. There are many resources required to make technology, including science, but also material, financial, sociological, ideological assistance. The key point that I want to make here is that when we make a technology like a computer, we need sometimes we need scientific input. But scientific input is not enough. We need to have the right materials, we need some financial backing, we need some supporters, and we need some champions who think that this technology can succeed. We also now, I'm trying to distinguish between science and technology here. What is science, what is technology? But now we see there's a greater interdependence among different areas. For example, biotechnology, nanotechnology, material science, we see science and technology overlapping. Okay, I'm going to switch gears once again. I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about technology now. Some technologies require certain conditions to operate. For example, an airport requires that you have an air traffic control center, a centralized place of control. Without the air traffic control center, which controls the airplanes taking off and landing, the technology of an airport would not function. So some technologies require certain conditions. You must have the condition in place before the technology operates. Nuclear power plants are similar. You must have centralized control. Okay? Without this condition, the technology cannot operate. Some technologies promote inequality. Technologies are not always neutral. Technologies are not always neutral. So we think, no, this is just a chair. What impact can it have? Maybe for this technology that's fine because it's a less intrusive type of technology. Let me give you an example. There was in the 1920s, there was an architect in New York City by the name of Robert Moses. He worked for the New York City government. And he was asked by the government to design highways in New York City, across the city. So what he did was, he designed, this is for pedestrians, but he designed highways for vehicles that were very low off the ground, so very close to the ground. You might have seen them in some movies where the highways are very close to the ground. And he did this deliberately. He designed a technology deliberately very close to the ground. And he designed it close to the ground so that buses, which are taller, could not pass underneath. So what he did was he designed the highways to cut across the city, dividing the city between rich areas and poor areas. And he designed the technology of the highways very low so that the poor people in America, who usually do not have cars and travel by bus, would not be physically able to access the rich area. The rich area was usually white people, the poor area was usually black people. So to keep this segregation, he deliberately designed a technology of highways which were very low so that large buses could not pass underneath to segregate the society. That is an example of a deliberate attempt to promote inequality using technology, a deliberate attempt. But sometimes technologies promote inequality in unintended ways. So in Hong Kong, if you enter a building, you might not even notice because we are all healthy, we're able-bodied, you have to go up 2 or 3 steps. If you're on crutches or you have a wheelchair, it's very difficult to go up those 2 or 3 steps. Very difficult, even there's 3 steps. I think in this building I had to go up 3 steps before I came into the building, or I had to go down actually, I had to go down a few stairs. If you're on crutches or if you're on a wheelchair, it's very difficult. So this is an unintended way of promoting inequality. Technologies are not always neutral. Technologies can have impacts. Sometimes the impacts are deliberate, sometimes the impacts are unintended. But technologies have an impact, right? And finally, some technologies create dependence. Maybe this is not the best example, but for us, the best example is we are now dependent on electricity. Without electricity, many of our activities in our daily lives would not function. 150 years ago, we were not dependent so much on electricity. There was no electricity. We used to sleep when the sun set, and we used to wake up when the sun rose. We were dependent on the sun for our energy. Now we have electricity. In my university, the students typically sleep at 2:30 a.m. or 3 a.m. Why? Because they have electricity. They're able to do so. They're dependent on electricity. The electricity powers their iPads, their MacBooks, and all of their activities are surrounded by it because we have electricity. So now we've become dependent on this technology.